Coming up on this episode of the Delta Huddle podcast.
I often go back to what is our mission? So why are we doing this? I tend to be very motivated by the why. And so that makes a big difference. And then the other piece is, for me, I am extremely passionate about, are we improving the caregiver experience? Are we making it better for those people that are working in hospitals? And are we improving things for patients? And so, again and again, I go back to that space to say, are we doing it? And then are we doing it in a way that makes sure that we can scale it, we can continue to do it?
Hey, welcome back to the Delta Huddle podcast. I'm Stefan Stenroos. One of the things I really love about hosting the Delta Huddle podcast is that we get to talk to guests and experts from all sorts of different industries, whether that's transportation, fitness, B2B platforms, etc. And today's episode is amazing because we get to dive into another industry that's very unique, has its own set of unique challenges, and that's healthcare. And with healthcare, you have things like HIPAA compliance, you have users and practitioners who are operating on 12-hour shifts sometimes. So it's a very unique environment to beta test in. And today's guest really shone a lot of light on how to test properly in that environment, how to have a lot of buy-in from the teams around you, and how to run a really effective beta program in such a unique industry. And that's Casey Hamar, Senior Program Manager for Beta and User Testing at Stryker. Stryker is a huge player in the healthcare field. If you haven't heard of them before, they create all sorts of different hardware that lives inside hospitals and helps improve the experience for not just caregivers, but also patients. And during our conversation, Casey talked about things like building, a body of context around feedback by testing with different audiences in different hospitals, how building relationships with those hospitals allowed her to expand their beta program, and also why healthcare is so unique to work in. I really enjoyed our conversation. This was a great episode. I think you'll love it too. So let's go ahead, hop right into it. So Casey, thank you so much for joining us on the Delta Huddle podcast. I was doing some research before today's episode, and I didn't realize the scope of Stryker, how large you guys are over there. You guys do so much stuff. And I'd just like to hear more about your beta program and the scope of the beta program.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Well, I'm in a division of Stryker that's called Acute Care. And then with that, I support our legacy Vocera products. Primarily. And so that is where most of my work done. And we call that clinical communication and workflow. That's where most of the work is done. So for clinical communication and workflow, these are primarily tools that help support clinicians and hospitals with communicating. And so it's a mix of applications. So they're communication applications. We also have hardware. Most people would recognize it like the Vocera badge. If you walked into a hospital, many times you'll see people wearing something that looks a little like something from Star Trek around their neck. And so actually that's what our founders, everything has internal names, or historically said first internal names that were based on Star Trek. But it's these badges that allow people to communicate with each other. And then we also have intelligent middleware that has defined kind of rules that make it so that when someone is in a hospital, they're able to track what's happening and then connect to the right person at the right time. If a nurse is in the room with a patient and they need help, they're able to say, call the charge nurse, or maybe there's a time where we also, like with our middleware, it can actually track certain things. Like with our Stryker beds, it has the ability to see if like the beds don't have the rails up the way they're supposed to. And so from the bed, it can contact our middleware, which then contacts the nurse who is taking care of the patient in that room to say the bed rail is not up, so that the nurse can go and take care of that because that patient is now a fall risk. So almost everything is based on clinical workflows that are needed. How do you make sure that a patient is getting the care that they need? And while we do have functionality on our badges that makes it so that if somebody has something called a panic button, so if a nurse needs or any clinician needs help, they can use that to connect to the right security team, or whoever it is that's been designated to have them come help them. But it's not pinpoint like location. And each hospital system tends to have different kind of guidelines around how they want to track and support their nursing teams.
I met you a while ago at this point, and I love that. It's such a complex environment and ecosystem that these products, like you're talking about integrations with other products in the same kind of environment. Now, what was cool to me is like, oh, what does beta look like in that kind of environment? And I'd love to hear you just kind of explain your program, because I think it's so special and unique, and I will say complex, but hopefully you can shed some light on that.
The beta, because we do have a lot of integrations, and we have an amazing integration team. We're agnostic to integration. So this is I think it's really cool. We have all of these people that are clinicians or experts in this that essentially partner with other organizations that provide care to hospitals. So they have tools in hospitals, and they make sure that essentially, how do we make this so that it's better for our clinicians? What are the things that we're doing to improve healthcare? From a beta perspective, it does mean that it ends up being a bit more complex because we're testing different products with different end users and kind of different setups. And so we always start with sort of one of the first steps is, of course, we do an evaluation to say, is this beta needed? We have a tool to help with us, help that conversation. And then after we've done that, we take the time to say, okay, what are our success metrics? How are we going to gather that data? What is needed? And kind of a first pass at that. And then what we do is we do the same thing for like, what are we going to need from a customer? So who are the partners that we'd want to do this with? What kind of technology do they need to have? What are the type of users? Like how innovative are they? What will we need in order to make sure this is really a good fit? And then the other big piece is we start off by internally identifying who are our internal subject matter experts for whatever that beta is, to say we want to make sure that we build the best test, but also that we're doing this in a way that we gather the right data and we are creating we're doing this in a way that best supports the clinicians who will be using it. So we want this to be an excellent experience for the clinicians, for the hospital that's our partner, and then also for our internal teams. And so it really has to start with that. Who are the subject matter experts to define all of those pieces?
That's great. And you talked about setting some success metrics. Now, the common success metrics I see are things like hitting a certain net promoter score, a satisfaction level, or like making sure that we don't have any critical or major issues. Now, are your success metrics any different than those, or how are they unique in your space?
It would be very similar to that for a lot of it, but we're usually looking to make sure, validate that it's working the way it's supposed to, and then it's meeting a certain quality, whatever that performance level is that we have an expectation of. We do all of that. We always are looking for feedback from the end users to say we have what is that score that we want? But a lot of times we also, a big part of this is, let's say we have a beta, because we're working with hospitals, we want to make sure we get all of those test metrics. But a big part of it is also that we walk away, and at the end of it, our partner in this, our customer, says, I want to test with you again. Maybe they don't love the product. Maybe they said, this isn't a great fit for us, or, we need a few more iterations to make this really more helpful for our clinicians. But we want to test with you again. And we say, from that perspective, we want to say that they felt fully supported. We listened, we responded, and we made sure throughout the process that we had a team that gave them essentially white glove support. That with every test, that is one of our starting goals.
Yeah. Now, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. Why is that so important that we're providing that good experience to those I'll call them customers, because they're a lot of the cases these are customers of yours. Why is it so important to have them have a good beta experience?
I think if we go to sort of the core of this, I think the first piece is like the whole Stryker mission is that together with our customers, we're improving healthcare. So like we start off with, this is our mission, this is what we're going to do, and we have values that we attach to all of those. So we actually say, like, with each of those, we're going to start off and make sure that we have it with integrity, accountability, people, and performance. So we have that defined, and we actually define that from our beta test. But the other big part is what we're testing. In most cases, we're testing products with clinicians in hospitals. And so it needs to be a great experience, because the work that we're doing, like, the test is important. I absolutely believe that the tests it's important to the work that we're doing. It's important to our products. It's important to our business. And the work that those clinicians are doing is life-saving. Like, what they're doing on a database, that has to be the priority. And so that's the work that they do is priority. What I'm doing is secondary, and I have to be adding something that's positive to their life, not making things more difficult. So sometimes that can be a little bit of a hard line when you're testing products, but it's absolutely necessary, especially like before COVID, things were hard. During COVID, it was really hard. And then afterwards, like, just healthcare as a whole is having so many challenges. And so we have to be in a space where we're really looking at it and saying, we're partners in this process.
I absolutely love that. And I had not heard a lot of people bring in their company values and those initiatives. I remember having something similar at WD, Western Digital, very into quality and reliability. And that was like their thing in the space. So we had that everywhere. Like, it was all over the walls. It was on like every meeting that we're talking about. We'd go over some of those things, or at least all the hands. And the beta program was an extension of that. So not treating it with that same care with our customers, we're kind of doing we would be doing our brand an injustice, right? So I love hearing about those specific initiatives, and building like together is huge. That co-creation aspect of, we can not only make this better for you, but your company and this whole industry seems like, especially in the healthcare space, very profound.
I think I would say that that's one of, I started doing this position when I was working for Vocera, and then Vocera was acquired by Stryker. And I have to say that, like, one of the things that's been great about that is these mission statements tended to line up as we kind of made this transition. And so I've been, anytime you have an acquisition, there's moments where you think, oh, I hope that this is a good fit. Yeah. And that's the piece that I have to say I've been one of the areas I've been most pleased with, and I've been proud to be able to work for an organization where we come back to that again and again. And I have to say, again, in a position where you're doing testing, you end up seeing all of these iterations, right? Like you see how things are made. And one of the things that I've been so impressed with is, like, when there's tough decisions to be made, I've watched our senior leaders go back to that and say, this is who we are, and this is how we're going to do the work. And so this is the decision we're going to make. And so many times that meant they were going to put more resources towards something, or we're going to shift a plan. But it's one where I have to say, it's been one where I've seen that aligning to our North Star is going to be what our mission is, and this is how we're going to do it. It's, for me, that's been profound. And I think it's had a huge impact on our ability to test.
Yeah, absolutely. Earlier, you had mentioned kind of working with different clinicians and whatnot, and being able to empower them and being able to collaborate with them as well. I think co-creation is something that's really, really powerful. And like you said, it's being part of that process and seeing the iterations that happen. One question I had is, do your tests sometimes change based on which clinicians you're testing with? Obviously, in healthcare, you have a wide array of practitioners and nurses, et cetera. Is that something that you sort of tool the test towards? Like, hey, we're working with this group, so we're kind of aiming for something different here?
Very much so.
Okay.
And sometimes that can be like, it adds a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to make sure it's the right fit. But many times we're having to say, okay, based on what we're testing, who are those end users and exactly how do we get the metrics to make sure this works? Or the other big piece is we want to start off and say, in order to test something, it has to be the right fit. And so we adjust that throughout the process to make sure that it is. Or there have been times where we switched to where we thought, oh, we're going to go with this particular end audience. And ahead of time, we decided, you know what, that's not quite right. We're going to go with a different space.
Gotcha. And go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
So I actually, going back to that, you talked about in the planning stages, the success metrics and talking about your audience. And I feel like I want to kind of like, I want to double click or dive into that a little bit. It's so important, right? Understanding who you're going to bring into your market, not only for who you're going to recruit, but how you are going to create that test and support that test and how that aligns to the objectives. Sometimes your audience won't align with the objectives that you're trying to get. So having those conversations early seems very important. And, you know, I'd love for you to kind of expand on why it's so important for you in your space to be able to define who your user is before you start testing.
It's such a good question. And it's one that can make it a little hard, right? Because you have to be able to do this and you have to have these open, kind of transparent conversations internally and with customers.
Yeah.
And so with our betas, because we're actually testing with clinicians in the hospital, I have to have a first agreement with the hospital. So I start off by going, we start with our beta program. We actually define what are the success metrics, what are the subject matter experts. We have a long checklist of things we kind of work through. But a big part of it is we say, okay, who is the best fit for this? Like, who is the best hospital, and then who are the end users? And then I partner very closely with our sales team, and we take these opportunities to our customers or to select customers and say, would you like to partner with us in this process? And we start off by going through, this is exactly what we're testing. This is who we think we need to test with. And then we ask them for feedback to say, this is what we need to test. This is who we think is the best audience. Is this right? And many times we'll do that multiple times where, we start off with maybe a C-level executive at a hospital system who many times ends up being the sponsor of the test. But then we're usually meeting with nursing directors, nursing managers, or even like clinical informaticists. So we're meeting with these cross-functional teams across the hospital to say, this is what we're doing, this is what we're testing. Who is the very best person or team to be testing this? We don't want to test something where it is the wrong fit. And so we do this validation multiple times in different areas. And it goes beyond just fit too. Sometimes it's ones where we'll talk to a hospital. A recent partner was one of the hospitals we worked with was absolutely amazing. But when we start off, we said, oh, these are the units we thought. And they said, well, you know what? One of the units tends to be incredibly innovative. They love anything where they get to try something new. There's another one that, they've been having some staffing. There's been a lot of changes. They've had some of their lead nurses recently retire. They're stretched pretty thin right now. It's not like this maybe is something they'd want to do, but we don't think that right now innovation is a good space for them. And so it has to be sort of this multi-layered conversation.
I want to break about two parts because I think they're so valuable to so many people. Working with the sales team. Now, I know that's a big thing in the B2B space is getting involved with your sales team. They know the customers, are in regular conversations with them. What do you think the value is for that account team or that sales team to work with you to get these people part of beta? Like what value are we adding to the sales team where they want to help us do anything?
That when first starting the beta program, that was one of the first pieces we had to kind of take a step towards is kind of defining how do we make sure this best supports them. And I think there's a couple things that really matter. The first one is it's an incredible way to build these really deep, engaged relationships with the customer. Because it's, for us, when we're working with the hospitals, we're not just working with like maybe it's not maybe the person that's buying the product, but we're working with all of these nurse leaders. We're every in the test, we're getting to test with people across the organization. We have all of these really like deep relationships, which is amazing. And I also go back to like engagement isn't just about like having an amazing experience. There's all of this research that's done on service recovery, right? Like how do you handle it when things don't go well? And in any beta test, we want it to go really well. But one of the best places you can hear things is when they say, you know what, this is what I love, and this is where you have some opportunity. And so being able to say, we heard the opportunity and we actually responded to it, I think it's one of the most beautiful ways to build those really deep relationships. Like it means that it's not just a customer. Now you're partners. Like you are partners in actually building this together. And then I kind of go back to, I remember years ago, I had a mentor who, she was a C-level executive at a hospital system. And she said, you know, if you handle complaints well, like you handle recovery well, service recovery well, people are actually more loyal than if things went perfectly, because it means that you are there to really serve. And she said, you know, it's kind of like if you have those friends that you can call in the middle of the night because maybe you need help with somebody, those friends that you can call in the middle of the night are those friends that you really have that deep relationship. Not that we'd want to do that, you know, with testing, but the other part of it is there are times where you say, you know, we're testing something, we're going to hear something that is challenging, and how do we respond? And it builds those like, we heard it, we responded, we made it right, and tell us more. And so I love that. So I guess if I go back to your original question, I think it's a great way to build engagement. I think you get a touch base with these other places or these other end users that a lot of times you don't get to do this with. And then the other part of it is it means that you have hospitals are actually helping. In our case, we have customers that are helping us build and prioritize the products. Like they're giving us a roadmap and saying, this is what we need for the future.
Yeah. I imagine those salespeople too love those deeper relationships, right? So kind of like they help you find good customers that are going to be testers. You provide a good experience, and now that customer has a deep relationship with multiple people inside your organization. And it's speaking from a SaaS perspective in a B2B world, we love those deep connections because it's harder to extract those. If I have no relationship with the company, it's easier to unsubscribe or churn, like leave without any problem. So I can see sales like lining up at oh yeah, you're going to great experience with the beta program. They get to potentially use something that's great. I get to hear anything that's working well or isn't. And it's just that all that seems like, you know, good flags for why sales would want to help out with someone on a beta program.
Our sales team has been like every step of the way. It's when that relationship has made it so it's possible for us to test, and they're the ones that are helping us kind of drive deeper into being able to test more and get this feedback so that we're building better products, and then also we're supporting our customers it is more of a customer success relationship.
Yeah.
One thing, Stefan, I'm sure you have are going to want to turn in a different direction, but
yeah.
Okay, so when I first met you, I reached out and I talked kind of about this beta community, right? A community for beta program managers. And I name dropped someone that I had no idea that you were going to be like, oh yeah, I talked to her already. So we have Jenna coming out to speak at an event in October. This will be past that point, so fix this, Stefan.
Yeah.
But you said, yeah, I've already connected with Jenna, right? That's one person that you were able to connect with. She's a longtime friend of Center Code. So I just want to kind of click on that community aspect. Why is it so important for you to connect with other beta program managers, other people in the beta space in these other industries?
So that's Jenna was actually incredibly helpful. And there's been quite a few people that I think are a part of your community that I've reached out to. When I first started this position, I went on LinkedIn and I just started looking for anybody that was supporting betas. And I started reaching out to them and saying, so I'm new to this position. This is what we have in place. What are things that I need to know about? And it was kind of like, what are the best practices? What are lessons learned? What are the tools that you use? What are things that I should be be aware of. And so I think just being able to start a program or to build program and have those best practices in what we're learning, included in that, is one of the best ways to do that, is to actually be connecting with these other professionals.
Yeah. Having those sort of external beta champions is like really, really important. Like, oftentimes the thing that we've seen with some of our other guests is some of those champions are internal. They're pushing for the beta program internally with other teams, whether that be, C-level, product, et cetera, marketing. But building also that network of like, we have someone at this hospital who is really going to vouch for us when it comes to this. And then, we can start building that network. So just that community aspect is something that I've always been fascinated with beta. And we touch on it every episode. It's like, once you build that community, it's just like the fuel for the fire to keep the program going. And, you just kind of scale really nicely from there. So, and Jenna's great. Hopefully one day we have her on the podcast. I feel like
she's speaking next week. So
we'll bring a camera and we'll turn it into an impromptu episode or something. But yeah, it seems like if you have your name set enough on Delta Huddle, eventually, it's like Beetlejuice, right? So
I want to go on to one more thing that you're saying. Like I read this book. I'm trying to remember what the book was called. It was something about insights. I'll post it somewhere.
Okay.
But insights come from the strangest places, right? So when we think about beta testing and say healthcare, and if you only connected with beta testing people in healthcare, your insights would be very limited. Sometimes you're going to get insights from the weirdest people. Like I mentioned to you when we first talked, Alex Larson, who was at Trimble. He works for B2B, and it's a big company, but like say part of it's fleet management for trucks. He has such good insights for people that are on B2B that if you narrowed to just one industry that you're in, you're just kind of crippling yourself in terms of what you could be implementing in your program. So that's why I love that. Like let's work with. You reached out to Jenna. She's been at Fitbit. She's been at Bose. She's been at Peloton. She's been at iRobot. That's a good diverse audience, and none of those are healthcare.
Yeah, but I feel like there's so many times that it's those. Everybody has built these programs and those best practices or those foundation pieces. There's so many tips and tricks they can give. I also feel like sometimes it's good to be able to just connect and say, this is a challenge I'm having, and having somebody else say, yeah, I have that same challenge. I haven't figured it out. Like, I don't have the answer. And just having somebody sort of say, yeah, well, these are a couple ways that you can make it a little better, but we're still working on it. And, those times where you can get a little discouraged. And so having other people to say, these are ways that you can fix this, or we haven't figured it out, makes such a huge difference.
Definitely.
Yeah. So beta managers, if you're out there, start networking like crazy. Join our Discord. I have to name drop the Discord. Yeah, join the Discord. So
get conversations going.
Great conversations. Yeah. Wanted to switch gears a little bit, and you touched on this a little earlier. Just the ability to be able to kind of work with healthcare professionals and really empower them to do more and to really succeed in their roles. It sounds like that's something that you're really passionate about in the space. So I just wanted to ask, like, what really drives you in beta testing? What's that one thing that you always go back to? It's like, yeah, this is why I'm here. This is why I'm in the space doing what I do.
I think there's two kind of areas that I go back to. So I often go back to what is our mission? So like, why are we doing this? I tend to be very motivated by the why. And so that makes a big difference. And then the other piece is, for me, I am extremely passionate about, are we improving the caregiver experience? Are we making it better for those people that are working in hospitals? And are we improving things for patients? And so again and again, I go back to that space to say, are we doing it? And then are we doing it in a way that makes sure that we can scale it, we can continue to do it?
Mm-hmm. And it must be really rewarding. I'm sure there's been a couple tests where you've been like, we can see the impact and we can see where that feedback is coming through, right? Because you've built these kind of close relationships with the caregivers, with the practitioners. So, that must be a big boost for you as well, right?
It is. It's like hearing when things go incredibly well is lovely. Like that always feels great. But I would also say, like, the transparency and being able to know where something isn't quite right, like, or where we have opportunity, is so rewarding too, because it means that we've identified it and we can do something about it before it goes like it. We've been able to hear this and respond to it with a small number of people, so that those partners that we have, like those nurses that we're testing, are going to improve what happens for nurses all over the world.
Yeah.
Like, and so that is one of the areas where, like, not that I celebrate when we hear where there's opportunity, but I think it is one of the best parts, is to be able to say, we identified it and we were able to improve this before this rolled out to, hundreds and hundreds of other places, other hospitals, thousands of end users.
And the time it takes to get that back after, say, like post-launch. So you launch something, the time it takes to get back into the funnel is pretty ridiculous. When you have these programs, it's kind of like embedded. That feedback goes directly to the people that can make the decision before it goes out. If it has to go through support and, anything on the customer service side and eventually work its way back and then have to get into development, we're talking months after launch to get any of those changes made.
Well, we're really lucky too, because many times when we're beta testing, not always, but many times we'll actually be on site. So we're in a hospital on a unit, and we're going to actually, like, I'll have the head of engineering, the head of product or the portfolio, whoever owns that product, will have the person who's the head of support for that. And they're actually there watching someone interact with it. And so it is like they're in the space while someone's using it. And when you have that direct contact, it just, the weight of it, and there's a new weight to it. It makes such a big difference.
It's an observation. So that those ethnographic studies are amazing. I love ethnographic studies. So when you get that observation, it's such an added context. We can hear stuff from customers inside, forums and posts, and like you being able to observe something, you might be able to explain something that they're doing that they don't even know that they're doing. So that huge context add.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that kind of ties into that is collaboration, seeing other, testers or customers, et cetera, coming in and collaborating, be able to say like, hey, I'm running into this issue here. And then someone can come in and say, we ran into the same thing in this, setting, different setting. It just adds that total context and really builds out the feedback in a way that you can't just say it's anecdotal anymore, right? You can't just say, well, that's just one person having this and it gets swept under the rug. Being able to build that kind of body of feedback and massive amount of context is incredible. And is that something that you've run into? I mean, it sounds like you're.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. It's and the context makes such a huge difference too. So many times you can kind of see, well, there's something in the data that isn't quite right, and it, but you don't know why. And so it really helps to get to why exactly is this happening, so that we can make it right.
It's such you need a diverse set of data. I was just reading something earlier. Someone was talking about just collecting, say, qualitative data. There's so much in the quantitative realm that helps with qualitative data. And same thing with when we talk about an attitude and behavior. Attitudes are things that people would say. So these are things that your testers would say. And the behaviors are things that they're doing. And a lot of times they can't necessarily report on those things that they're doing. So like this combination of, I think it's NN Group that really had this with Christian Rohr. He talked about this quadrant of qualitative and quantitative and attitudinal and behavioral data is like that makes up a wonderful landscape of the data that you can collect from users to kind of tell this story, to get that impact, to make a better experience for everybody.
I love that or just the fact that you're pointing out that you have all of these different options, and that it makes a much better picture if you have it all together.
Oh yeah, you can't. One thing that I learned, I got my UX certification from NN Group back in 2013. It's been a while. She might have been. No, it's 2013. I think it's 2013. But if you get stuck with one research method, one test method, and you just try to apply everything to it, you're going to just muddy everything that you get from it, and you're not going to get the right data. So a lot of times when a product manager or anybody's coming in saying, hey, I want to run a survey and I want to get this data, and you're like, oh, that's probably not the best method to get that thing that you want. And there may be a handful of things that we have to do. We may have to run, some interviews and maybe some surveys, and we may have to run a beta test or an ethnographic study where we have to go on site and watch them. It really depends on the situation. You can't just limit yourself to, nope, I'm doing a survey because it's easy, right? Or I'm going to do Zoom interviews because I can spend 30 minutes and talk to somebody and I'll check off the box and say, yep, I talked to somebody and they said it's fine. That's not real by any means.
It makes, I couldn't agree with you more. And we find this a lot in betas because there's always it feels like it'd be easy to just send out a survey, right? But if we think again, with healthcare, if you have a nurse, nurses aren't on their phones all the time. They're not answering emails. So an email link to a survey, or even if you have QR codes, however, collecting that, it tends to be one of the areas where I'll get a small set of people that will actually respond, but I tend to get answers that are sort of like yes and no, or we know that they like it or they don't like it, but I have no idea why. And so we have to be able to combine it with other research methods. Otherwise it's data that doesn't get us to what do we actually need to do about this.
Yeah. I think I mentioned this when we called. I won't call out the specifics, but we were working with a company that the target market was people on ships, right? So our admin or our main user was the ship captain, specifically someone on the IT side near the management of the ship captain. But then the users were all the people on the boat.
Yeah.
Now, if you can imagine, those people on the boat are not going to want to necessarily sit on a platform and submit all their feedback in a web browser. They're probably not going to do that. So there has to be another way. How am I going to get this data from these users where it's the way that they would give feedback? Like, do I need to have a call with them? Do I need to, send them an email, then let them respond back? Do I need to give them a notebook and then grab all this data when they come back to land and they can give it to me? Like, what's the best way I'm going to get the right information from this user? And you always take that user into account when you're thinking about what the best way to run the test is, because not every user is going to respond to the survey. Not every user is going to respond to maybe the interview. Maybe some people are too shy. Maybe people are too busy. That's a big one, especially with your nurses. They're working. My sister works very long shifts, and she was an ER nurse, so she's very, very busy. And it's like, if you wanted to get feedback from her, it's the time that she's sleeping, and she's not going to give you feedback.
Just dream up a feedback ticket. We'll get it eventually.
We'll have to talk to her on Instagram when she's on her day off. That's how I'm going to get in touch with my sister.
Exactly, And kind of piggybacking off of that, what are some of the methods that you do use to get the feedback from people who are in these very busy positions where it's constantly, working sometimes 12-hour shifts, right? Always on call, et cetera.
That's so this is one of those kind of fun spaces where when we start the test, we go through and we say, these are all of the metrics that we need to collect, and how are we going to collect it? In most cases, we have, with almost everyone, we'll put together 5 or 6 different ways that we can get that data. And some of it we can get by like pulling it off of Vocera or Stryker Analytics, right? Like there's some of it we can collect automatically. So those analytics, of course, we have access to, but many times we're looking for more information about kind of those spaces of when things are working or not working, and exactly what's happening. And so we typically have to have it so we have teams on site. And then what we'll be doing is we'll be rounding, we're observing, we're collecting the information during training. And then we'll be checking back, and we might have small focus groups, but we have all of these different touch points that we build in. Many times we'll customize it based on whatever unit is. So like the emergency department may be one where they'll let us round, but so we'll have somebody on site rounding, and then they essentially, sometimes they'll be walking from room to room with someone, or they're observing, or, we work all of that out with the hospital ahead of time. And then we'll combine it with a lot of these other kind of tools. But it tends to be one of those spaces where we have to get a little more creative.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes you need the creativity to collect the information. How you bring it together is important.
Yeah.
At the end, you do need something for you to be able to go through in a nice way, your team to go through in a nice way. But we do want to make it easy for the user, right? We want to not add friction to them in a lot of cases.
We want to make it as easy for those end users as possible, every step of the way. And that's one of kind of our core tenets is we'll say when we're starting, we have to own the data collection. So it means like, if it means that we have, if we're going to be there at 3 a.m. to be able to collect that, that's what we'll do to make it so that this works really well. But we want to make it so that this really serves those end users.
Yeah, I love that dedication.
Fun to get creative with some of those ways. At one time I was at a company and we did this thing called a bug bash. So we had internal dogfooding, so we have our own team using our products, and it was always it was like pulling teeth to try to get them to submit feedback. Like I'm too busy to submit that feedback. So we did this thing. It was a trick that we had at our company. We brought cookies into a conference room, and for some reason our floor of this office, like, they smelled food. Like, if they saw food, they would come running. There would be like messages on people's like group chat saying, "Hey, there's food in the kitchen." Yeah. And it's like this message went out. There's cookies in this conference room. And what we had in there was a bunch of devices. So we had a bunch of devices set up, and we wanted them to test certain experiences in each corner of this conference room that we tested. And then we had our logging tools. So we had someone on one side sitting there with the tool saying, "Hey, here's the issue that this user ran into while trying to complete this task. Here's that problem that they ran into." And we just cycled through like 100 people into this room. So in that one, it was like a 2-hour span, we got over 100 people through this to test out all these different experiences. Like, man, sometimes you just got to get crafty, and that best practice may not work for every situation. And we needed feedback so we can get this off to the beta people, but we want to make sure that it was functional enough and not broken before it entered into real spaces. So,
I love that.
Yeah.
For the cost of cookies.
It was the cookies was the winner in my book, because it's how we I don't want to say tricked them. It's like we coerced them. Right. So I imagine if at Center Code, if I were to go say, "Hey, there's stickers inside, like cool stickers inside this office space," people would kind of flock over there and make their way and like, "Oh yeah, that's cool." It may not be cookies. That was our old place, but
yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So you need some kind of carrot on the stick to get people to, get in there. Right. So whatever works. So you have data coming in from all these streams, right? 5 or 6 different ways of getting it, Now you have this, massive amount of data. How are you guys breaking it down and going through it and actually seeing, where are the correlations, where are the causations, et cetera?
So we tend to be doing that throughout the beta. So as all of the data is coming in, we're watching it and kind of breaking down as, step by step to make sure we're doing it. But whenever possible, we're using tools that make it so it's much easier for us to collect the information. So if it's a survey tool, or if it's a tool that just allows us, like rounding tools that let us collect the data quickly. And then we typically have, like, as part of those subject matter expert teams, we have certain team members that are actually going through it. So many times I'll own chunks of that where I'm actually evaluating and reviewing it, and then making sure that we review that with the, we always have a process that's defined that says when we have this, we have who's informed, who has to make decisions, and what's the timeline that they have to make those decisions. So we're kind of working through that throughout the beta, and then we break it out based on who the team members are that are experts in those spaces.
Gotcha. And then how often are you guys having conversations with stakeholders? Is it something that's kind of weekly? Are you doing it towards the end of the test? Are they always constantly involved with how the data is coming in and how you guys are breaking down the feedback?
For stakeholders, we usually have a kind of broken out into like core, primary, secondary. And then for the core team, it's usually broken into like the first week. We're meeting at least for a huddle once a day to gather feedback and hear how things are going to respond. And then after that first week, in most cases, we're looking at it at least once a week. And then for those other kind of for any of those like primary, secondary teams, we have a communication plan that's kind of updating them as we go through this process. Kind of, we treat it similar to if it was a go live of a product. And so it's a defined communication that'll go out. And, at the beginning of the first day, the second day, the third day, if there's an escalation, then we have a different path that we have defined. But it's sort of a defined communication plan.
That's awesome. I know we operate in a similar way. This is actually something I see as like a cross industry thing, that weekly presence is really useful. We actually have something set up in our system to send out weekly updates to the admin and stakeholder teams. Like, here's what happened this week in testing, and give like the latest. It also has like I don't want to say like the oh crap moments, something like that escalation, right? Like, hey, something's broken, and it goes straight from that tester to an escalation team. And we have like flags in there that would say like, hey, critical bug, users unable to use the product anymore. It goes to that team. It triggers immediately. It won't be set up on that cadence, right? So,
yes, I love that. Yep.
Yeah. Kind of cool that like even things like that transcend the like specific industry space, and it's like there are just best practices that kind of apply regardless of what industry.
Yeah.
That book that I was referring to is "Sing What Others Don't."
Oh, okay.
It's called "The Remarkable Ways That We Gain Insights," and it was such a useful. Like, they talked about how they got bioluminescence inside for X-rays. Like how that was founded. And it was like this professor just wandered into a lecture hall that was, he just wanted to clear his mind. So he wandered into a lecture hall, and he was sitting there just thinking about his trying to solve this problem for X-rays. And it was talking about an animal, like it was an animal lecture about these animals that had bioluminescence. And he that's where he kind of discovered like, oh, this will work. And it's like, you find it in the strangest places. You would have never thought that this medical professional would have found it inside, animal kingdom related items. So that was the reference of like why I think it's so important to break out of your industry and look at how others can help, and how other in this case, beta program managers are doing it, because they've been through some weird stuff and they've overcome it in a different way that you might not have been thinking about it.
Yeah.
Sorry, absolutely. Didn't mean to derail. The book came up and I'm like, oh, it was such a good book when I read it. It was a while ago, but it was such a good book.
That's a good point, because, a lot of the best discoveries are almost accidents, right? You stumble upon it not intending to, see it. I think that's why testing is important, because you could go in with an idea of what you want to see, or the issues that you might run into, right? And then I'm sure you've seen this, Casey, is that the feedback you get is like, wow, they're discovering this thing that we had no idea could have been a problem, right? Or they find that golden bug. Golden bugs are a kind of internal term that we have here, where it's like, man, if this went out, it would have absolutely, maybe, not really done the product well. It could have tanked the product, et cetera. And finding that within the test
or the brand.
Or the brand. Yeah, the brand, if we want to go really crazy. So, but yeah, just being able to, you have to be open to it, right? And you were talking about transparency earlier, is being able to have that open mind and say like, we might be doing the test for X, Y, Z reasons, but we're going to run into ABC. Just being able to be open to it is so important. Yeah.
And no, I think it is incredibly important to have a defined plan ahead of time from a transparency perspective. So, like, who are we communicating to? Where are we communicating? If we have challenges, what is that escalation plan? Who has to know about it? And part of that is, I always think, I never want to have it so like my sales team member gets a call from the customer a couple of days later, or they join a call and they hear, oh, we actually had this challenge, or we love this. So like making sure that those key stakeholders are informed. But the other part goes also for our leadership. Like I never want to have it so that one of my leaders is surprised by a call. And so if we are having challenges, being able to celebrate that transparency and say, hey, this is what we found. This is what's being done. This is the decision that has to be made. I think you have to have that defined before you ever start a beta test, so that no one is surprised.
Yep, no silence.
Ounce of prevention, right? That's the saying.
Yeah,
that's what we always recommend too. You should always start with a plan, even if it's simple. Basic. What are we testing? Why are we doing it? When we plan to do it, and who we're testing with. like a one pager, just something where we can get in a room, chat with, or get on a Zoom call and chat with a couple people and say, hey, here's what we're trying to do. Like, is everyone aligned with this? That alignment is really key, because if you don't have it and you go run a test and you come back with some data, you're getting a lot of people that are going to throw some stuff at you. They're not going to be happy with what you had done or why you had done it. They're going to fight you.
Or they'll question the results, right? You'll have data. They'll say, you need to retest this because I don't agree with it.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of my early days. This is the wrong user. All right, they'd say like, this isn't, my market wouldn't say this, and I'm like, this is what they're saying. So every point forward, I said, okay, who are we testing with? You tell me who you want. We're going to run a screener. We're going to get those people. Now, when we get into the conversation and here's what they're saying, you show them, hey, this is. They're fitting this market description, right? They're fitting this persona. They're fitting this, psychographics, demographics. They're fitting everything that you kind of set forth to me. So either you gave me the wrong information, or this user's lying, and I feel like I want to trust the users give me the right information.
Yeah.
Especially if they're customer.
Yeah.
But if you're always armed with the data, right? If you have that data there and all of that kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Objective kind of information, right? Goes back to what we were saying earlier about context and just having that ability to really flesh out the feedback. Then you can say like, well, we have, customers here, here, and here. They're all saying this. They had it in these different perspectives, et cetera. I think that's another really important thing is, the diversity of perspectives, right?
Yeah, I mean, that plan. So I've been in the space. I understand this problem very nicely. Yeah. You need to have that CYA, we'll call it cover your ass, because you're going to get people that are going to fight against you, right? Because it's I don't want to keep saying like you're calling your baby ugly, right? So like, hey, this is negative feedback from our user, and if you have someone sitting there fighting you the whole way, it's like a horribly negative time, and that happens a lot with beta program managers. Your job is really to define what's not working and what's working. So you're going to run into like some conflicts because people thought that's what was going to work, and now you're just voicing from the user's behalf. Here's what they're saying, and sometimes they think you're interpreting it a different way, or maybe people are interpreting it a different way. But getting down to that grassroots of like, this is user feedback. This is the voice of our customer. I'm just trying to amplify it internally. Transparency is the best way, and collaboration is the best way to counteract that.
And with just kind of on that point of, if you know that there's going to be somebody who may not agree with results, I work very closely with our design team. And we follow the same process where, as part of this, when we define who those end users are, one of the things we also like to do is say, okay, who are people that need to actually hear the results, or who should be helping define the questions, because we need them to be supporting us. Who needs to do it because they're an engineer, they're somebody who's going to help develop it. But the other one is, who are key leaders in the organization, who the results will impact them, so they should be able to hear it, so that it isn't secondary. And so often with those people, we'll actually reach out to them and say, we know you're a key leader in this organization, or you're supporting this. This is what we're defining. Do you have any questions on the areas you want to input? And then the other part is actually asking them to sit in on result sessions. So if we're interviewing, having them listen in, because so many times if you hear it yourself, it lands differently than if it's like even a written quote, or if it's metrics, the analytics, it just feels different. And so then you can be partners in working together towards a better outcome, versus like debating what somebody meant when they said it.
Yes, absolutely. I did that same. That's worked well for me in the past, bringing those people, especially to see it. Yeah. When I first started doing usability tests, like I first got into it many years ago, one of the best practices was like bring in one of your stakeholders and let them watch it. So we had someone sit in there and watch it. We'd have recordings and all the stuff, but they'd watch it, and it was just like super eye-opening. They're like, oh man, right? So it's not like I was saying something was broken or busted. It's like, no, they're watching the user, and they're watching me not say anything either to like influence the negative behavior.
Yeah.
So inclusion is so key in these environments, especially when you're a beta program manager. You can't fix anything yourself. You can't
No.
make a decision on the product yourself. You can't, market it. You can't sell it. You can't do anything. All you're there is facilitating this test with users, and you're trying to get the information to the right people to make those decisions. And you don't want to be combative. You just want to give them the right stuff to be most useful, because your mission, right? Like, you want to improve this product for the better of everybody.
Yeah.
Like, that's a key part of this. And for people that are struggling with that stakeholder buy-in or the accuracy of data, bring those people in, try it earlier, get them involved, like Casey's recommending, get them in those results meetings, so they're not just getting stuff tossed over the fence in an email, and now someone's like, hey, why is this not working? No one's going to like that email.
I had, early in my career, right after grad school, I ended up landing with a large consulting firm that I worked with for quite a few years. A lot of my work was around research, or was in research, but also this firm is specifically known for change management. And so I got to work with all of these, get contracts with about 95% of the Fortune 500. And a lot of the work we did was around change management. And those skills I've used, like, it's kind of a bit of the foundation of our beta program, is saying, okay, we have to think of this from a change management perspective, because you need to be able to gather data in a way that is effective and efficient. And, you're building these relationships, but at the end, what you have to have is trust and relationships that say, we want to do this again, and we're going to do something about the results. So just to your point, Chris, when you said you're bringing in these stakeholders, like, that is so key to so many things, where you're looking to say, I might collect data that is challenging. So how do we make this easier to consume?
Definitely.
Yeah. And we've kind of hearkened to it a lot during this episode, but I feel like the culture at Stryker has been amazing for your program, because it seems like you guys are just so open. Nothing is really siloed. All the teams are connected and willing to communicate and work together to make sure that all that information is shared properly. Like you said, you don't want to make it so that someone is surprised that a call came in, right? Or that something's coming through. So I think that's really incredible.
I have a note here. This is something we used to say a long time ago. It was a customer validation professional, someone that does beta testing as a professional, is a handful of things. And I'm going to read just a couple of them, because it stood out to me when we were talking about that. Part-time psychologist, part coach, part researcher, part interpreter, and this is my favorite one, part bartender. Those just resonate so well with, like, all the things that you have to go through when you're doing a beta program, because you have to deal with internal and external stakeholders. And again, I don't want to say you are no one, but you have no rule over anything outside of the way the beta test is being done, and it's always being scrutinized by the people that want all the information from it. Yeah. So being flexible, being a little bartendery and a little bit psychologist, and hearing the research stuff. And I speak research and I love it. It's one of my favorite skills that I've ever picked up. So you are a CV professional, Casey.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. I wanted to wrap up today's episode, just asking you, like, hey, what is some advice that you would give to some beta program managers, and what advice would you give to your past self as well before you kind of entered the world of beta?
So I think I'd start off with what I would do again, and I think the two things that I would do again immediately were being able to say, we're going to start our program based on our mission and our values. I feel like that, setting it up so we're tying it directly to who we are and how we do work, has paid off again and again. I think building really great subject matter expert teams so it's not me making this up. It's me going to them and saying, I need your expert advice. I need you to help define this. And as part of this, when we have those test results, I want to be able to point to you and say, like, you raise your hand and say, I stand behind these results because I helped define them. I think that's worked extremely well. And then I think that that being able to begin with the end in mind. So starting off every test by saying, what is our end results for like the test results? How do we support our team and how do we support our customer? That we define what that's going to look like, and then we're not going to deviate from it. So we're going to provide excellent customer service. We're going to make sure our team is supported, that they're not put in a place where they don't have the support they need. And then we're gathering those metrics in all of the different ways that we need to. I think that what I would do differently, especially when we first started kind of the beta testing, it was one where I felt probably a lot of self-imposed pressure to make sure that we had results, and it was adding value. And so with that, a lot of times I would go to extraordinary efforts to be able to gather data and, pull it and put it together and get it out and respond to things. And because of that, it meant that, I was working a lot of hours or, doing stuff that long-term isn't scalable or, it's not something that someone can do forever. And so I think if I had to do it again, I would ask for help faster and earlier and say, I need additional help here. And these are the reasons. This is where I need help. Because I think that it's easy to set yourself or to put things in a program where then there's the expectation of being able to do it. And it was invisible to everybody else. No one sees what's happening. And so I don't think I did myself any favors with that. So I would say when you're building a program, build it to be scalable and also make sure to ask for help when you need it.
It's the hardest part, and one of the biggest things I see in program managers is they will, bend over backwards to get something done because it's actually easier than trying to explain what value they're getting and how we can scale this and how we can, what help we need to get. So I hear it all the time, I'm too busy doing this stuff to be able to get more resources to do this better. I'm like, that's a huge problem. It's very counterintuitive to making sure that your program is getting good quality data and efficiently, right? Because if we're spending 12-hour days and enforcing this stuff through, how are we making this scalable? One of the best advice I ever got from anybody is you need to make yourself replaceable. You need to be replaceable. And that is the key to stepping up into, say, management. Because if you can explain exactly what's going on, why it's valuable, the ROI of it, what you need in place, that is loads harder than just doing it. Right. It takes a lot more. And sometimes I've been there, right? I've had to do the exact same thing you're doing with my 12 to 16-hour days, scraping through everything I can. And it's like, I have that same advice. Thank you. You gave myself my past advice to somebody. I don't know how I'm going to use it, but
well, it's hard when you're starting program too, because so many times it's the somebody says, how will we get this done? It's not doable. And you're like, okay, so if I just do it once, then I have proof we can do it, right? It's a little of that Kaizen model of we can build on this after it's been done once. But that also can work against, you have to be able to say, maybe I do it once, but then I've documented all so that we can make sure to not have it, we have additional support.
Yeah, I second it. Setting yourself up for future success is key. Yes, you can do it once, but you might get stuck doing it again and again and again, and then you have no help because you are the person who does that.
Yep.
Well, Casey, thank you so much for joining us. So many unique insights. The perspective that you had was incredible. Just, we haven't talked to someone who's from the healthcare field, and I think everything that you shared today was awesome. So thank you so much for being on the episode today.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I have to say that when I started reaching out to all of these, beta program managers across the nation to ask, what do I need to be thinking about? Again and again, they'd say, you need to look at center code, which they shared a lot of other insights, but that was one of the things that they'd also say is this is one of the tools that will make your life a lot better. So,
well, thank you, Casey.
I don't think we could get a better endorsement than that, right? So that's solid. But yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for listening to the Delta Huddle podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, leave us a like or a 5-star rating. You can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. We'll see you in the next episode, and happy testing.